Hi heroes, in this video I'll be guiding you through everything you need to know as a beginner and get you started in Mobile Legends. We'll be going through the map on objectives, roles, emblems, hero selection, abilities and controls, items and shop, and throughout the video there will be general tips for each section. My name is Teeds. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe and click the bell for more Mobile Legend videos. Let's get started. The battlefield. Here you can see there are 3 lanes. We have top lane, middle lane, and bottom lane. One half is the enemy side and one half is yours and your ally's side. The goal is to destroy the crystal, which is located in the enemy's base on the opposite end of the map. The team that destroys the opponent's crystal first wins the game. On the battlefield, in between the bases, there are turrets in each lane. Each lane has 3 turrets each with a total of 9 for your team. There is the outer turret, the inner turret, and the base turret. Between the lanes is the jungle. Here you can find jungle monsters which grant gold, buffs, and experience. There is grass in the lanes, and in the jungle, hiding in the grass or bush will deny the enemy vision and they will not be able to see you. In the jungle we also have Turtle and Lord. Turtle and Lord are 2 major objectives that will often be contested for and aren't as easy to get as smaller jungle monsters. You can find them in these places here. Turtle grants a gold bonus, and the one who last hits the turtle will receive a shield that absorbs damage. Lord is the strongest monster in the jungle. Defeating him may require some assistance from your team until some who are strong enough to solo. The team who defeats this creep will receive gold, XP, and enhanced minions. Lord will join your side and attack a random lane if your team defeats it. Here is an overview of the maps you'll find in the jungle. Litho Wanderer. This creep will not attack you. It grants you a regeneration effect, including allies nearby and minions for a short period of time. Scaled Lizard grants a healing buff. Crammer grants a healing buff. Rockosaura grants a healing buff. Crab grants a gold buff. Then there are the elite creeps. The Serpent grants a blue buff which will reduce ability cooldowns, mana costs, and energy costs. And Find. This one grants a red buff. With red buff, every time you attack an enemy, lava will attack them once, dealing extra damage and slowing the target. When the game starts, minions will spawn from each base and fight once they reach each other. Turrets will attack minions when in range, however, will attack any heroes in range if there are no minions. Because of this, if you're squishy or do not have enough defense, avoid being inside tower range if there are no minions to avoid taking damage, as they will deal a lot of damage to you. As a beginner, most of you will probably be laning and maybe a few of you will choose the jungle. I will make a separate in-depth guide for jungling. But for now, in lane, you'll want to try and last hit the minions. Doing this will give you more gold and XP. You can last hit by simply waiting until the minion is low enough to kill it or damage it over time, but make sure you time it right to get the last hit. When I am laning, I try not to just stand still in one spot because that gives the enemy a perfect chance to hit you. Instead, I will switch between moving and hitting the minion, moving and hitting the minion. This way you can avoid any future attacks or have a higher chance to avoid future attacks. During your game, a lot of new players do not use these, but it's good to get used to it while you're learning. There are 4 buttons on the right side. These buttons are how you communicate with your team, which is extremely important in a team-based game. The first button will tell your allies to launch an attack. Tapping this will tell them to launch the attack where you are. The second button will tell your allies to retreat. This is best used for when the team fight seems to be at a disadvantage for your team or you just don't have enough backup. The third button will tell your allies to gather here if you request backup. The last button is a bunch of different commands. The one that would help your teammates if you're in lane is enemy missing. This will let your allies know when they are being ganked. Ganking is basically just ambushing an enemy without them knowing. There are other things like defend the turret, I'll take the certain buffs, and gather for team fights. Generally, all of them are useful, but a lot of them will be more used than others, and it's good to get familiar with these while you're a beginner because they are very important once you reach higher levels. There are multiple things you may have to do during your battle to the crystal. The main things are pushing or split pushing. Pushing is going towards the enemy's defenses like turrets with minions or with your team. You'll be taking down the enemy defenses and putting pressure on them, getting closer to their base. Ganking. Ganking is a surprised attack. You'll be surprising the enemy you're ambushing, and you can do this by hiding in the grass or attacking them while they're unsuspecting. Rotating. Rotating is traveling to other lanes to help or gank. I suggest doing this when your lane is clear of enemies and your ally is struggling or there are multiple enemies near them. Initiating. This is mainly for those who are supports, tanks, or have some form of crowd control that can set up fights. Defend or defending. If you're at a disadvantage, such as teammates dying and only a few of you are alive, while the whole enemy team is alive, it may be better to defend at your objectives to avoid the enemies killing you all, or as Mobile Legends calls it, wiping you out. Then we have harass/poke. This is usually for those with long range attacks, and this forces enemies to play defensively. We have peel, which is the use of crowd control to force an enemy off an ally who was escaping or retreating. And then we have farm/farming, killing jungle camps or minions for experience and gold. You will mainly be doing this early game. Next, we have roles. In Mobile Legends, you'll have roles. I'll give you a brief overview for each. In-depth guides for each hero will be released in the future. Before I get into each role, here is a general map placement for the role so you have a good idea of where to go when playing. Where players go will depend on the meta, however you can generally just follow this until you reach higher level ranks in Mobile Legends. For those who do not know what meta means, meta stands for most effective tactic available, and this can change as the game gets updated with adjustments or hero release. They always change it in a major way when the season ends, but I'll be sure to keep you updated on that. When the game begins, you and your allies will spawn at base and spread out. In higher levels of play, laning placements are much more strict, but as a beginner, it will not matter as much. I would take this time to just try your best to follow it. Although in my experience, I often got teammates who did not know where to go, so I would go to an empty lane or rotate to an ally who was against multiple enemies. On top lane, generally a mage or an assassin. On bottom lane, marksman. In middle lane, mage or marksman, and in jungle, fighter or assassin. Supports and tanks will rely on their carries, so they will usually not lane alone, but as a beginner, these roles are pretty difficult, so I would take the time to learn this one properly. If no one is jungling, try to keep only 2 heroes maximum in each lane. One player will be by themselves. First, we have tanks. Tanks are the front line. They stand in the front of your team and soak up enemy damage. Tanks can provide crowd control, which can assist you in team fights, saving your teammates and setting up kills. Crowd control takes in the form of slows, stuns, and more. Your goal as a tank is to support your teammates both in saving them and setting up kills for them. Tanks have high defense but generally low damage. They can be built damage if you equip the right items though. Next, we have supports. I know I just talked about how tanks support, but supports do the same thing in a different way. Supports focus on literally supporting your teammate in every way possible, from healing to buffs to shields to taking some damage here and there. A support's job is to make sure your teammates are getting kills and also keep them from death. Your job is to support, so generally supports are sticking around someone or traveling elsewhere on the map to allies that need you. Next, we have marksmen. Marksmen have a lot of damage and are ranged. They are sometimes referred to as ADC or carry. ADC stands for attack, damage, carry. Marksmen attack enemies from a distance, and your positioning as a marksman is important as they are pretty squishy and do take a lot of damage. Marksman destroys objectives pretty quickly and deal a ton late game. Next, we have mages. A mage is a magic damage dealer with high magical power and more reliant on their abilities. They are pretty squishy but deal a lot of damage. Mages often need protection as they're easy to focus. Mages focus on crowd control abilities and high damage output. Next, we have fighters. Fighters are a mixture of basically tank and damage role. They do deal a lot of damage, but they also can take a lot of damage. Fighters are close range and usually have mobility, disruption, durability, and damage. Fighters are multi-purpose and can do a lot of different things, kind of like a jack of all trades in a way, and can be built in different ways. Last, we have assassins. Assassins focus on bursting targets down. Assassins are sneaky, they can roam around the map and ambush or gank, as they call it, enemies on other lanes. They can burst down squishy opponents with ease, however they are also squishy themselves. Assassins wait for the right moment to attack and in my opinion are better for experienced players in the game as they're not easy to use and require game knowledge, also in my opinion. Assassins are easy to kill if they are making the wrong move with positioning and timing. As a new player, I recommend trying to understand at least how 2 roles work. I recommend carry roles for beginners such as mages, marksmen, and fighters built damage and maybe some defenses. I found mages and marksmen to be the easiest. As a new player, your game will most likely be very uncoordinated and tanks are a very important role, but as you're playing with players who are learning the game as well, it's better to have a damage team rather than relying on a new player as a tank who probably doesn't understand completely what to do yet. Next, emblems. When you're in the main page, on the bottom left, you'll see preparation. You'll be taken to a page where it says emblems. There are different emblems for each role and 2 general emblems called physical and magical. Emblems will grant increased stats, upgrading your emblems will give you higher stats. You can do this with battle points, emblem fragments, and magic dust. Each emblem has its own talent tree as well where you can unlock more stats. You do not have to equip the emblem on the role it says it's suited for. Emblems can be equipped on any hero. Generally, you should unlock and upgrade Assassin emblem used on physical assassins, fighters, and marksmen. Mage emblem used on mages, fighters, magical assassins, and supports. Support emblem in the future when you're ready to tank/support. Works best for tanks and support, although a lot of players say that they can work on all heroes due to its stats. You can get materials for emblems such as fragments and magic dust from chests or making some purchases. You'll learn more over time on which emblems to upgrade, however this is what I would use for now. As you can see on my page, I made the mistake of not researching and wasted materials on upgrading emblems that are not considered that great for now, so I hope I kept you from the same mistake. Next, hero selection screen. When you begin the game, you and your teammates will be choosing and locking in what hero they want to play. Once you've locked in your hero, you'll have 3 icons on the bottom right of the screen. First is your spell screen. Spells depend on the hero you're playing and what you're after. You'll unlock more as your account levels up. These spells offer different effects that will support you throughout the match. You can only equip 1 spell. I'll make a more in-depth guide for these, however, for now to get you started as beginners, the first spells you'll have is Execute and Retribution. Execute will deal damage to enemy heroes and Retribution deals damage to minions and jungle monsters. Retribution is very helpful for junglers and clearing jungle camps. Under spells, you have equipment builds. As a beginner, I suggest equipping one of these builds while you get used to the mechanics and gameplay. I'll make in-depth guides about counter building and building in general in a separate video, but I've won most of my games as a beginner just by using these builds. Under that is emblems. Equip the emblems that you want for the hero you're using. If you want to choose a hero from a specific role, you can simply just click on the arrow here and heroes will be categorized. You can easily find tanks, supports, mages, etc. Next, abilities and controls. Each hero has a different set of abilities, their own passive, some have more than others, some have shorter cooldowns, and some have longer cooldowns. Each hero is unique with their set of abilities. As you gain experience in Mobile Legends, you'll level up, which means you can level up more abilities. Depending what ability you're leveling up, you may be increasing damage, decreasing cooldowns, increasing crowd control durations, and more. This makes it important to invest into the right abilities. You'll have all abilities maxed out at level 15. Abilities have different labels, which give you a basic understanding of what each ability does. Let's use Layla as an example here. Layla's first ability is labeled Burst. Burst abilities are abilities that deal a lot of high damage very quickly, as opposed to dot damage or DPS, which stands for damage per second. Dot damage and DPS damage deal over time, but burst damage deals high damage very quickly. Layla's second ability is labeled as AoE and CC. AoE stands for Area of Effect. Area of Effect in this case here can deal damage to multiple enemies at a time, unlike her first ability that will only deal damage to one enemy. CC stands for Crowd Control. Crowd control are things like slows, stuns, and anything that will basically slow down the enemy or stop them. Layla's crowd control on her second ability is a slow. Crowd control is important for setting up kills, fights, escaping, and chasing down enemies. Her ultimate is an AoE, another area of effect ability. You'll find other heroes with different ability labels such as Lunox. Her first ability has a heal. I highly recommend practicing them in a casual first and reading what their abilities do or a practice instead of just going in without any knowledge. On the main page, clicking the gear icon on the top right corner, you will see settings called controls. Everyone's default control is standard and lowers HP percent, the first two. Controls are a bit tricky. Some heroes actually benefit more from other controls, so I've seen. Players sometimes will swap their controls depending on what hero they want to play. You can change these settings while you're in game. For now, I recommend trying them and see what feels best for you. You can change them in game by clicking the cogwheel next to the map. I usually switch between advanced aiming, closest target, and lowest HP, but again, it depends on who you're using. Lastly, items and shop. As I said earlier, I recommend to use the pre-made builds while you're still learning the game. As you get more experience, you'll slowly start picking up and learning how to counter and what to build, but if you don't, that's okay, because we have a lot of guides on YouTube. In Mobile Legends, you can prioritize items you want to pick up by tapping the prioritize button above the item you're looking at. You do not have to be in your base to buy items. It will pop up on the top right when you have enough gold to buy the next tier. You'll be automatically combining items together the more items you buy to build the final item. Let's look at the Feather of Heaven tree. The top item is the final item. You have to purchase all the items and the upgrades below to reach the cheapest price for the final item. You can purchase it directly by saving your gold, but there is really no benefit to doing that because you'll get minus stats from the smaller items while working towards the final item, which have a lot better stats. You can open the shop during the game by tapping the right top button where it says how much gold you have. Prioritizing is important to avoid building multiple items at once. I strongly recommend prioritizing your items instead of having a lot of lower tier items. In the item shop, if you're looking for something specific, it is nicely categorized for you as you can easily look at things you're after. And that is all for today's guide. I really hope this beginner guide has helped you. I'll be releasing a lot more in-depth guides as well as hero guides, so please do subscribe and click the bell if that is something you're interested in. Like the video if you found this helpful. I hope to see you again for the next one. Bye!